When I was 18, right after finishing high school, I wanted to make some lasting memories before starting college. So that summer, my 3 close friends and I planned a mountain climbing trip together. To prepare, the 4 of us joined a climbing group and took many courses on climbing techniques. After we were ready, we picked a mountain that was suitable for beginners. Essentially, if you had even a bit of climbing experience, this mountain was easy enough to go up and down alone. But since we were novices, the group assigned to seasoned climbers to lead us on the climb. On the day of the climb, we gathered at the trailhead and set off. The mountain mostly had easy hiking trails, with just a few spots that were a little tricky and required care. Still, this climb put our stamina to the test. We climbed for about 2 hours, and I was trailing behind the others. At one point, we reached a tough uphill stretch of muddy trail that really drained your energy. I kept my head down, watching my footsteps carefully as I followed the others ahead. Suddenly, I realized my shoelaces had come undone. I squatted down quickly and tied them tight. But when I stood back up, I noticed something terrifying. Everyone ahead of me was gone. The friends and group leaders who were just bead in front were nowhere in sight. Panic surged. How could they have disappeared so fast? I had only stopped for a few seconds to tie my laces. There was no way they could have walked that far ahead. Filled with anxiety, I started jogging forward, trying to catch up. Looking back, I realized this was a foolish move. In my panic, I ran carelessly, and before I knew it, I stepped on empty air. I tumbled off the side of the slope. I landed deep in a dense thicket of trees and bushes, a spot almost impossible to spot from the trail. Worst of all, my entire body was bruised and battered. My left foot throbbed with pain. I couldn't stand, and it felt dislocated. I called out desperately, but no one answered. After a while, I forced myself to calm down. I told myself to save my strength. My friends would notice I was missing and come looking. So, I stayed still, quietly waiting for someone to find me. But days passed. Not a single person came by. I lay there looking at empty food wrappers and an empty water bottle. Supplies I had with me, and deep despair engulfed me. It seemed I was going to die here. I was so weak, I barely felt pain anymore. I thought about how I had finally gotten into my dream university. My future hope seemed gone now. Silently, I apologized to my parents in my heart. Then my consciousness began to fade, just when I had given up completely. In that deep, silent mountain, I suddenly heard footsteps crunching on dry leaves above me. The sound came from the slope above, summoning all my remaining strength. I called out weakly toward the sound. My voice was barely more than a whisper. Then, I saw a figure poke their head over the ridge. A flashlight beam swept down and landed on me. I waved feebly back at the light. Soon, ropes were dropped down near me. A person rappelled down to reach me, quickly gave me some water, then secured me to their body. They carried me up the slope, though I was barely conscious and my memories are hazy. This rescue is etched in my mind. After being carried out, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. A nurse told me that someone at the trailhead had found a public phone and called an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, I was the only one there, unconscious by the side of the trail. I stayed in the hospital for a long time, recovered. As the years passed and I grew older, this memory became distant. But just recently, almost 30 years later, and just days before my 48th birthday, I decided to climb that mountain again, to make up for never reaching the summit back then. That day, I walked slowly, savoring every step. What part of yours? What part of yourselves? What part of yourselves? What part of your silence? What part of your silence? What part of your silence? Oh. The paper face on the door, a boy's face staring blankly into the dark. A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Grandpa, whose grip tightened on my hand. The forest's silence pressed in around us. The creeping dread in the air was almost suffocating. Suddenly, Grandpa whispered, "Don't stop. Keep moving." His voice was calm but firm. We stepped past the eerie tree, our footsteps soft on the leaf-mist-covered ground. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a warning. I kept stealing glances back at the doll hanging from the tree. It felt like the boy's eyes were following us, pleading for something, help, maybe, or a warning. But Grandpa didn't say a word as we hurried on. After several tense minutes, the sounds of insects and wind slowly returned, and that oppressive silence lifted. The familiar trail beneath our feet brought comfort. Soon the glow of the town lights appeared ahead. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the image of the boy-face doll from my mind. At 8 years old, I sensed that mountain held secrets beyond what I could understand. But I trusted Grandpa. His warning not to linger spoke volumes. Years later, as I stood back on that mountain path, the memory came rushing back, how the living and the dead seemed to brush close, how a simple hike could become a brush with things unseen. And I knew, more than ever, that some places on earth don't want to be found. Minus from that summer memory to the present, the mountain called me not just for adventure, but as a guardian of stories, warnings, and those lost between worlds. I am just a witness, walking in their shadows. Later, I found this very strange. Grandpa saw it too. He said, there was a strange doll tied up in the tree. That caught our attention. No sooner had Grandpa finished speaking than we noticed a woman standing beside that tree, her back facing us. I asked Grandpa, how could someone just be wandering in the dark mountain like this? He replied, maybe she's lost. With that, Grandpa took my hand and we started walking toward her. When we got about 5 meters away, the woman suddenly quickened her pace and started to walk faster. Grandpa immediately called out, "Are you okay? Are you lost?" But she completely ignored us, just kept moving ahead. Seeing this, Grandpa and I picked up our pace to keep up. Grandpa asked her again, "Miss, do you need any help?" No sooner had the words left his mouth than the woman abruptly stood stock still. An eerie atmosphere settled around us. Then, in the very next second, she spun around sharply and charged straight at us. The suddenness of her movement startled both of us. Grandpa, quickly sensing danger, scooped me up into his arms and turned to run down the mountain path. Because I was facing Grandpa's chest, I was looking directly at the woman behind us. I caught sight of her rushing after us fast and got a clear look at her terrifying face. Her neck seemed broken, and as she ran, her head jerked wildly from side to side, front to back, in a grotesque way. I was so scared I shut my eyes tight and pressed my face into Grandpa's shoulder, too afraid to look back. After a while, Grandpa whispered, "We're almost at the road. Don't be scared." I slowly opened my eyes but instantly regretted it. Right there, inches in front of me, was the woman's face. Her eyes were wide and locked onto mine as she cried out in a piercing voice, "I'm going to kill you both." That terrified me. I burst into tears right then and there. Grandpa must have heard her scream too, because he quickened his pace even more and finally ran us out of the mountain path onto the road. Once we were safely off the trail and onto the street, I looked back and saw the woman standing at the entrance of the path. She didn't chase after us anymore. For a moment, she just stood there staring, then turned around and ran back toward the mountain, vanishing into the darkness. Later, when Grandpa and I reached town, I glanced at the time. It was already 10:30 at night. I told Grandpa how relieved I was to have escaped safely, but we couldn't stop thinking about that woman. What was she really? The next day, Grandpa took me out for a walk near home. While passing by some neighbors, Grandpa mentioned our strange encounter with the woman the night before. One neighbor interrupted. "Are you talking about near the abandoned house up the mountain?" Grandpa said yes. The neighbor then called her mother over, an elderly woman who told us the story of what happened there long ago. A long time ago, there lived a woman deeply devoted to her child. One day, her child disappeared. Back then, child abductions were common in many places. The woman came down to town looking for help. The police and townsfolk searched everywhere, but months passed with no trace. Eventually, everyone gave up the search, but the woman never gave up. She would often wander alone, searching the mountain and the town for her lost child. Some townspeople felt sorry for her and tried to persuade her to stop looking. But whenever anyone told her to give up, she would argue fiercely, causing tension with those around her. Over time, her relationships with the townsfolk soured. Many started avoiding her. Some even grew to hate her. Rumors began spreading that the woman had killed her own child. Because of this, she faced harsh blame and scorn from the community. One day, the woman stormed into town, causing a scene. She threatened everyone, saying she would make them all feel her same pain. Filled with anger and sorrow, she later went to the big tree on the mountain and took her own life there. The elderly neighbor told us, "You're not the only ones who have seen that woman." Since her death, locals have reported seeing her on the mountain several times. The creepy doll tied to the tree. It was meant to comfort her restless spirit. The picture glued onto the doll's face was drawn by the town's elders, based on their memories, to resemble the child of that woman. But it seemed to have little effect. The woman's lingering resentment still seeped deep into the mountain. When Grandpa and I heard the story, we were at a loss for words. I just felt a chill run down my spine. Grandpa, though, was deeply saddened by the woman's tragic fate. That afternoon, he took me to the flower shop. Together, we went to the tree and left fresh flowers for her, hoping one day her spirit might find peace. That was the only time I ever saw her on that mountain. As I grew older, I often ventured up that path alone to visit friends or check on my uncle, but I never encountered that terrifying woman again. Still, every time I passed the old, abandoned shack and glanced at the tattered, eerie doll hanging from the tree, I would think of her frightening face. A small fear would rise in my chest. One year, I went climbing on my own. Back then, I had no idea what danger meant. I was simply curious to see the scenery, breathe the fresh mountain air. I arrived at the foot of the mountain around 3 in the afternoon. In the distance, I could just make out a waterfall. I estimated I could reach it in about an hour after all. I thought, it's just like Tucker Mountain back home. Lightly packed, I stepped onto the trail with a spring in my step. My goal was simple: get to the waterfall, snap some photos, and return, though it was a tourist spot. After about 5 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen another soul. Up ahead, I spotted a bulletin board next to some trees and a warning about bears in the area. Curious, I walked closer. The board was plastered with flyers, missing person notices, all for people who had vanished in these mountains. The sheer volume of the notices was unsettling. Cold dread crept in. How could such a modest mountain claim so many lives? Despite my unease, I was young and strong. I told myself I wouldn't be so unlucky, so I pushed on, following the signs. I marveled at the untouched nature around me. Insects chirping, birds singing, the scent of pine filling the air. It was refreshing, calming. My earlier fears faded with every step. I thought, this was absolutely the right choice. Soon, the sound of flowing water greeted me. The waterfall must be near. Looking toward the sound, I spotted a faint dirt path winding through thick grass. The signs hinted that way, so I headed in without hesitation. But the path quickly narrowed and steepened. Still, the clear murmur of the stream beckoned me onward. When fatigue hit and I decided to rest, I noticed something strange. The insect and bird sounds had faded into silence. The rushing water was gone too. Only my breath and heartbeat filled the stillness. It felt like I hadn't seen a signpost in ages. I pulled out my phone to check my location. No signal. No compass. No tools. I moved to a small clearing and looked around. Mountain peaks pressed close on every side. No paths. No signs of human life. I must have climbed deep into a wild, remote part of the mountain. A terrifying thought took hold. Where was I? Then I realized I was lost. Looking at my watch, it was nearly 5 o'clock. I had been walking way longer than I expected, and soon it would be dark. Panic quickened in me. I chose to turn back. I had to get down before nightfall. The way back was steep, narrow, and full of forks, but I had no memory of these splits in the trail. Everything looked exactly the same. The path kept rising and falling, and I couldn't tell if I was climbing up or heading down. That disorienting fear, not knowing if you're going deeper into the mountain or escaping it, gripped me tight. Cold sweat soaked my clothes. I forced myself to stop and rest, trying to calm my ragged breathing. "And get out of here," he said, still catching his breath. I remember feeling a chill run down my spine. Something about that moment stuck with me, the way his face went pale, the way he avoided looking at me directly. We hurried to finish the survey, our eyes constantly flicking to the shadows in the trees. Later, when I was lost on the mountain that day, my thoughts kept drifting back to that warning. What exactly was that thing lurking in the woods? The strange unease I felt wasn't just fatigue or fear of being lost. It was deeper, something ancient and dark, tangled in the wild. That night, after finally escaping the mountain, I held the missing person flyer tightly in my hand. It was a reminder that the wilderness doesn't forget, and neither should we. I never took nature lightly again. Minus that experience changed me. The mountain was just a place to explore. It was a living, breathing mystery. It had its own rules, and breaking them could cost more than just getting lost. As I thought about that young man whose face smiled from the flyer, I felt a strange connection. Maybe it was the way the forest drew us in, gave us hope and then pulled it away. Or maybe it was something else, something I still couldn't explain. All I knew for certain was this: out there in the dark woods, you're never truly alone. And sometimes, the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters, but the stories left untold, waiting to be found. "Let's get out of here," we decided, and quickly made our way down the mountain. As we walked, my senior kept complaining, saying maybe that man was right, something really did feel off about this mountain. Yeah, I agreed. There was definitely a weird vibe. We hurried to finish our work and descended. On the way back, we passed the spot where that sack had been, but it was gone. Both of us found that strange, but neither of us stopped. We kept talking as we walked downhill. Then my senior suddenly asked, "Do you believe that man in the convenience store, the one who said this mountain is haunted?" I shrugged. "Look around, this place is creepy enough. Ghosts showing up wouldn't surprise me." No sooner had I said that than my senior froze. "Did you hear that?" He pointed quietly toward a thick, dark cluster of trees. "Is something over there?" I flicked on my flashlight and shone it into the shadows. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a figure. Before I could see clearly, my senior screamed, "It's here, run!" We bolted, sprinting down the mountain as fast as we could. When we finally reached the convenience store parking lot, my senior was loudly complaining. That thing was terrifying. Just then, the middle-aged man who had warned us about ghosts before hadn't left yet. He was resting in his car but got out and came over to talk to my senior. "What did you see?" My senior explained. It was a female ghost, blood all over her face, thin hair. She was holding something I cowled and recognized. The man said, "A ghost with thinning hair." Huh? I asked him, "Why do you want to know all this?" He replied, "I heard just a few days ago someone saw a ghost up here. I was planning to come back later to live stream the mountain." Then he went to his car, grabbed some streaming equipment, and told us, him heading back up to check it out. Neither I nor my senior could stop him.